Shadows of innocence. The early morning sun filtered through the dusty windows of Cole Dawson's ranch, scattering golden streaks across the wooden floors. The air smelled of hay, leather, and the faint tang of livestock. Cole moved with practiced ease, his hands rough from years of toil, brushing a strand of hair from a horse's mane before securing the stall door. His movements were deliberate, silent, like the man himself. The ranch was his kingdom, and he ruled it with quiet devotion. Elena Harper sat near the edge of the barn, her fingers tracing the soft fur of a small gray kitten nestled in her lap. The tiny creature purred, pressing against her warmth. She smiled faintly, a fleeting softness in her otherwise composed demeanor. Her attention flitted occasionally to her phone, resting just out of reach, though she pretended it wasn't there. There was an unspoken tension in the way she shifted, a nervous energy hidden beneath the serene surface. Cole glanced toward her, noting the delicate curve of her shoulders, the gentleness in her gestures, but also the way her gaze lingered elsewhere. He said nothing. Words were seldom necessary between them. The ranch had taught him patience, the virtue of watching, waiting, understanding more than speaking. Yet even the most silent of men could sense when something was amiss. Elena's fingers continued to stroke the kitten, but her mind wandered. There had been messages in the early hours, brief exchanges filled with laughter and subtle innuendo. The thought of Damian Cross made her pulse quicken, a thrill she had not anticipated. She tucked the kitten closer, as if shielding it from the storm of her emotions. The creature's innocent eyes reflected her inner conflict, a mirror to her own wavering heart. Cole moved closer, his steps careful across the hay-strewn floor. He reached out, not touching her, but letting his presence fill the space. Elena felt it immediately, the weight of his silent gaze, the unspoken question hanging in the air. She forced a smile, returning to the kitten, but the tension lingered like a shadow at the edge of sunlight. Outside, the ranch stretched endlessly, fields of gold fading into distant tree lines. The wind carried the faint scent of wildflowers and earth, a reminder of the world beyond their small enclosure. Cole's hand rested on the barn door, watching the horizon, aware of the quiet fragility in the life he had built. He had trusted Elena, had opened his world to her, and yet a subtle shift told him that trust could be fragile, easily cracked. Elena rose, cradling the kitten as she walked toward the loft. Her steps were measured, careful not to betray the rapid beating of her heart. Each motion was choreographed, masking the turmoil within. She paused at a beam of sunlight, letting the light warm her face, though it did little to soothe the unease. In her pocket, her phone buzzed, a message from Damian. A single word, yet it carried the weight of temptation, of desire that dared to break the boundaries she had promised herself to respect. Cole's shadow fell across the floor, long and steady. He didn't speak, but his presence was a tether, a silent reminder of what was at stake. Elena's fingers lingered on the kitten's fur, a grounding point against the storm of emotion raging inside her. She knew the path she was contemplating, and she knew the consequences should it be discovered. The barn was quiet again, the only sounds the soft rustle of hay and the kitten's contented purring. Elena set the small creature down, watching it pad across the floor, unaware of the complexities swirling around it. Her heart clenched, a mixture of excitement and fear, longing and guilt. She knew that the choices she made in the coming hours would ripple through their lives in ways she could not yet predict. Cole's eyes met hers briefly, and in that silent exchange, more was communicated than any words could convey. There was love, yes, but also caution, a subtle tension born of unspoken suspicion. Elena swallowed, nodding slightly, masking the conflict within her. She turned toward the loft, taking the first step on a path that could not be retraced, feeling the weight of every heartbeat, every stolen glance, every temptation lurking just beyond the edge of her carefully constructed world. The kitten leapt onto a windowsill, sunlight glinting in its fur, a fleeting symbol of innocence. Elena paused, watching before moving on. Beyond the barn doors, the ranch lay bathed in morning light, tranquil yet poised on the brink of upheaval. The calm was deceptive, a fragile veneer over the tensions simmering beneath. And as Elena ascended the loft stairs, phone in hand, the first choices of betrayal whispered in her mind, promising thrills and danger in equal measure. The day had begun quietly, but the shadows of temptation had already crept into the heart of the ranch. And somewhere in the distance, Damien's presence lingered, unseen yet undeniably felt, setting the stage for a collision that no one could ignore. Whispered temptations. The afternoon sun slanted low across the ranch, casting long shadows through the open barn doors. Dust motes danced lazily in the golden light, drifting over stacks of hay and weathered tools. Elena Harper's fingers trembled slightly as she held her phone, the screen glowing with a message from Damien Cross. Just a simple meet me, yet it carried the weight of possibility, of danger, of desire. She glanced toward the loft, where Cole Dawson worked meticulously, repairing a fence post with steady, practiced movements. His silhouette was calm, reassuring, yet the very stability it represented only intensified the thrill of her secret. Elena tucked the phone into her pocket, her hand lingering over the edge as if bracing against the conflict within. She moved toward the barn side entrance, her steps measured and silent. The kitten followed her, tail swishing nervously, its tiny paws padding across the wooden floor. There was innocence in its movement, a sharp contrast to the tension that gripped her chest. Every step toward the hidden path along the creek felt like a betrayal, yet every heartbeat screamed anticipation. Damien was waiting where the sun met the tree lean, his figure partially obscured by shadows. His presence was magnetic, commanding without effort. Elena's fingers brushed against his hand as they greeted one another, a touch electric enough to send a shiver down her spine. They spoke in whispers, the words careful, rehearsed, yet laced with unspoken longing. He handed her a small, folded note, the ink smudged at the edges, but the sentiment unmistakable. You belong to no one but yourself, even if your heart forgets. Elena's pulse quickened. She felt the thrill of rebellion, the intoxication of being wanted outside the boundaries of her everyday life. But beneath the excitement, a knot of guilt tightened. Cole's steady presence haunted her thoughts, the silent devotion in his every action now amplified in her mind. Her hand tightened around the note, a tangible reminder of the choices she had made. Back at the ranch, Cole's instincts hummed quietly beneath his composed exterior. He paused in his work, leaning against a post, eyes narrowing as he noticed the subtle absence of Elena's presence. A fleeting unease prickled at him, a sensation he had learned not to ignore. Even in her silence, her absence spoke volumes. The ranch had taught him to read what was unsaid, to notice the smallest changes in patterns, in footsteps, in gestures. Today, something was different. Elena and Damien found a secluded spot by the creek, where sunlight dappled the flowing water and rustling leaves provided cover. Their conversation was intimate but cautious, filled with laughter, half-truths, and the tension of secrecy. Elena felt the contrast sharply, the freedom of speaking without restraint, yet the ever-present weight of her conscience. Her hands brushed against his again, lingering, searching, hesitant, and her heart betrayed the excitement she tried to suppress. The kitten, left briefly by the barn, pawed at the sunlit floorboards, oblivious to the emotional storms swirling around it. In Elena's mind, the feline became a mirror, reflecting the innocence she felt slipping through her fingers. Every purr, every gentle nuzzle, reminded her of what she risked with each clandestine meeting. Yet the thrill of Damien's attention was intoxicating, a dangerous pull that she found increasingly impossible to resist. Time passed unnoticed. Shadows lengthened, and the golden light of late afternoon painted the creek in hues of amber and copper. Elena knew she had to return before Cole noticed her prolonged absence. The walk back to the barn was measured, each step a silent negotiation between desire and duty. Damien lingered, his hand brushing hers once more in a fleeting farewell that left a warmth lingering long after she turned away. Back inside, the quiet of the ranch enveloped her. Cole's presence was a constant, invisible yet grounding, and the tension between them now held a new edge, one born of unspoken suspicion and unnoticed glances. Elena set the kitten down gently, its soft purrs a brief solace against the storm of emotions inside her. She avoided Cole's gaze, pretending the day had passed as any other, yet the subtle unease in his posture told her that her secret might not remain hidden for long. Evening settled over the ranch, painting the sky in streaks of rose and violet. Elena lingered near the doorway, phone tucked safely out of sight, her thoughts tangled between longing and guilt. The day had revealed the dangerous allure of temptation, and the proximity of betrayal now felt suffocating. She knew that every stolen moment with Damien drew a line she could not easily erase. Cole moved closer, his shadow stretching over her hand as she reached for a lantern. No words were spoken, yet the silence between them spoke volumes. Love, loyalty, and suspicion entwined in a fragile dance, each aware of the tension, but neither willing to confront it openly. The air seemed charged, the calm of the evening a fragile veneer over the undercurrents threatening to surface. As night fell, Elena stood in the doorway, the kitten curled in her arms, Damien's note pressed in her pocket, and the unspoken weight of her choices pressing on her chest. The ranch slept around them, oblivious to the secrets brewing within, but the quiet carried a promise. The coming days would test hearts, loyalties, and the very foundation of trust. And somewhere beyond the shadows, temptation waited, patient, relentless, and impossible to ignore. Fractured silence. The morning light crept slowly over the horizon, brushing the ranch in pale gold. Cole Dawson moved through the barn with a quiet intensity, his hands working with practiced precision, though his mind churned with unease. Something was off. Elena's absence yesterday had not been explained. Her eyes had avoided his, her steps had been measured, but her subtle tension had spoken volumes. He did not need words. He had learned to read the unspoken. Elena Harper entered the barn quietly, carrying a basket of eggs. She moved as though nothing had changed, yet the flutter in her chest betrayed her. Damien's presence lingered in her mind like a shadow she could not shake, and the weight of guilt pressed down on her with every step she took. She kept the kitten close, its soft fur a grounding comfort against the storm of emotions within her. Cole's gaze followed her from the corner of the barn. He did not speak at first, letting the silence hang, heavy and deliberate. Every movement she made seemed exaggerated under his quiet scrutiny. She dropped the eggs into the crate, pretending to be absorbed in her task, but the subtle clink of porcelain against wood was a sharp punctuation in the still air. The first clue appeared almost innocuously. A folded note slipped from her apron pocket, landing on the floor with a soft flutter. Cole's eyes narrowed. He stooped silently, picking it up without a word. The handwriting was unfamiliar, slanted, deliberate, intimate. A shiver ran through him, not of fear, but of recognition. Betrayal rarely arrived quietly. Elena noticed him holding the paper, the color draining from her face. The kitten leapt to her shoulder, sensing her tension, pressing against her as if to shield her. She opened her mouth, searching for words that could bridge the growing chasm, but none came. Cole's eyes, steady and unyielding, told her that explanations would not erase what had already been revealed. The barn seemed to shrink around them, the sun casting long shadows that twisted across the floor. Every corner felt like a trap, every silent sound amplified. Cole moved toward her, his steps deliberate, measured. He did not shout, he did not accuse. He merely let the presence of truth settle between them, heavier than any spoken confrontation. Elena's fingers trembled as she clutched the kitten. She wanted to apologize, to reach for him, to explain, but the words tangled in her throat. Damien's note seemed to burn in her pocket, a reminder of choices she could not undo. Her loyalty and love for Cole wrestled violently against the pull of temptation, leaving her paralyzed in the center of the barn. Cole's hands, rough and scarred, rested lightly on the edge of a stall. He did not touch her, but the weight of his attention was tangible, a silent reckoning that demanded acknowledgement. The barn's quiet was broken only by the faint rustle of hay and the kitten's soft purring. Yet the sound felt almost sacrilegious against the tension coiling in the air. A sudden breeze swept through the open doors, stirring the note in Cole's hand. He read the few lines, each word a confirmation of what his instincts had already known. Betrayal was never subtle, he thought. It spoke in shadows, in absent gestures, in the things left unspoken. He folded the note carefully, setting it aside, as if the weight of confrontation could be measured in the touch of paper. Elena stepped back, the kitten pressed against her chest, her eyes pleading without speaking. She had imagined countless scenarios, rehearsed excuses, but none could undo the impact of discovery. Cole's silence was louder than any accusation. It carved a space between them that had not existed before, a chasm filled with disappointment, hurt, and unspoken questions. The afternoon sun slanted through the barn windows, illuminating the dust in the air like motes of memory suspended in time. Cole turned slowly, moving to tend the horses, a deliberate act of separation, a signal that their lives had shifted irreversibly. Elena watched him go, the weight of her choices pressing down, the realization that innocence, theirs and the kitten's, had been compromised. In the quiet aftermath, Elena sank to the floor, letting the kitten curl in her lap. Her fingers traced its soft fur, seeking solace in the one being untouched by deception. Outside, the ranch remained as steadfast as ever, but within the walls of the barn, the delicate fabric of trust had frayed. Each heartbeat echoed in the stillness, a reminder that the consequences of her secret were no longer avoidable. And somewhere beyond the barn doors and the fields of golden hay, Damien's absence was felt more acutely than his presence had ever been. The secret they had shared had come crashing into the light, leaving nothing untouched, leaving everything vulnerable. The stage was set for choices that could not be undone, for reckonings that demanded courage, and for a reckoning that would exact its toll in ways Elena could scarcely imagine. The price of betrayal. The ranch lay bathed in early morning mist, each blade of grass glistening with dew. The world seemed unchanged, yet everything had shifted. Cole Dawson moved quietly through the paddocks, his hands steady on the fence rail, his posture rigid. The barn behind him, once a sanctuary of shared routines and silent understanding, now held the memory of betrayal. He did not shout. He did not accuse. His actions spoke with the weight of unspoken authority, a quiet reckoning that demanded acknowledgement. Elena Harper lingered near the barn doorway, her fingers tracing the worn wood as if grounding herself in familiarity. The kitten nuzzled against her, its warmth a fragile comfort against the storm inside her. She had rehearsed apologies, excuses, ways to reach for him, yet none of them could erase the choices she had made. Damien's absence was palpable, a hollow space where temptation had once lingered, leaving only the echo of what could have been. Cole approached slowly, his shadow stretching across the floorboards, long and deliberate. He carried no anger in his voice because none was needed. His gaze alone conveyed the depth of his disappointment. Every silent step he took seemed to measure the distance between trust and betrayal, weighing Elena's heart against the consequences of her actions. She met his eyes briefly, the unspoken acknowledgement hanging heavy in the air. The barn was silent, save for the kitten's soft purring, an almost ironic contrast to the tension that crackled between them. Elena knelt to set the kitten down, letting it scamper across the sunlit floor, as if seeking freedom from the weight of human choices. She folded her hands in her lap, the act of stillness a mirror to her internal turmoil. Cole did not move toward her. He did not need to. His presence alone held the gravity of consequence. Elena drew in a shallow breath. I never meant to. Her voice faltered, swallowed by the enormity of the moment. Cole's eyes softened slightly, but the subtle steel beneath the surface remained. He reached for a letter lying on the table, the same note that had set this chain of events in motion. He did not read it aloud. The mere act of holding it, of acknowledging it, carried more weight than words ever could. Cole turned toward the barn doors, gesturing toward the sprawling fields beyond. Elena understood the message. The life they had shared, the quiet intimacy of everyday routines, could no longer remain unaltered. The betrayal demanded distance, reflection, and accountability. Every step she took toward him was measured, deliberate, an unspoken plea, a silent acknowledgement that the balance between love and trust had been broken. Outside, the ranch seemed to exhale in the soft breeze. The horses shifted in their stalls, the wind rustled the leaves, and the world continued as if unaware of human failings. Yet within the barn, time felt suspended, each heartbeat echoing with the weight of choices and consequences. Elena knelt once more to lift the kitten, holding it close, feeling the fragile pulse of life against her chest, a reminder that innocence persisted even when hearts faltered. Cole's hand rested briefly on the edge of stall, a quiet gesture of presence, not reconciliation. Elena watched him, the man who had once been her anchor, now a measured force of silent judgment. She understood that love alone could not erase betrayal, that actions bore consequences regardless of intention. The ranch had taught him patience. The betrayal had taught him clarity. Elena finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I see now. I understand. The words were simple, yet they carried the weight of regret and the acknowledgement of the fracture she had caused. Cole nodded once, a subtle motion, enough to signify recognition, but not absolution. The air between them remained charged, heavy with lessons learned and trust irreparably tested. As the sun climbed higher, casting warm light across the fields, Elena stepped away, leaving the barn in quiet solitude. The kitten followed her briefly before darting back to the corner, an emblem of resilience amidst human failings. Damien's influence had vanished, leaving only the stark reality of choices made and their consequences realized. Cole returned to his work, each movement deliberate, a silent assertion that life on the ranch, and life itself, persisted even in the shadow of heartbreak. The barn doors closed slowly behind her, the soft thud resonating like a final punctuation. Silence settled, tempered by the soft purr of the kitten and the rustle of the wind outside. The cost of betrayal had been paid, not in loud confrontations, but in quiet reckonings, in the subtle distance between hearts, in the fragile balance of love, trust, and forgiveness. And in that stillness, a lesson remained etched in the dust and light. Even when innocence endures, hearts bear the weight of choices. The day continued, unbroken, yet everything had changed.